Oh, sigh, sigh, sigh. Hello again. How are you doing? Don't mind me. I was just thinking about the good old days. Back when Eli, the computer guy, actually mattered. Look at this beautiful picture here. Look at this beautiful picture. This is from Web Summit. This is from Web Summit Lisbon, like 5 or 6 years ago. This is the main stage, up in front of like 15,000 people. That's me down there. That's the back of my head up there. Do you remember when I mattered? Do you remember when I mattered? I remember when I mattered. That was a while ago. That was a while ago. Hey, Lewis. Hey, Lewis. I'm the ghost of your future. Run in fear, mutter futter, run in fear. Anyways, I was just looking at those old pictures. I'm going to Web Summit Vancouver. So there's, it used to be called Collision Conference. Now they just call it Web Summit Vancouver. I guess it's for the branding purposes or whatever. But I will be going to Web Summit Vancouver May 27th through 30th. And I'm going to go there and I'm going to take my new microphone and I'm going to take my setup of some sort, and we are going to interview a hell of a lot of startup founders and investors and those types of folks to say, hey, so how are things going? How are things going? How do you feel about the current global macro environment? And how are you pushing your ball forward? So anyways, I got the email for that. I got my media pass, so that should be interesting. I do have to say, if you are actually part of the media and you deal with the technology world, the Web Summits are the best for media, dealing with media. I have no idea how it is for the startups. Oh, they're startups. Anyways, don't know how it is for the startups. But for media, they just treat you absolutely awesomely. I've been to a Collision Conference down in New Orleans. I've been to Web Summit in Lisbon, and they just treat you very, very well. So anyways, if you're thinking about going, attending one of the events, at least in a media capacity, definitely think about doing it. They do just a terrific job. So anyways, as you may or may not know, I'm known as Eli the Computer Guy. Basically, my project currently is silicondojo.com. The idea being, what if high-quality technology education was simply as accessible as running water? Do a lot of things there. We have self-study classes, we do Zoom classes, and we are going to have our first fireside chat next week, Wednesday, with Martin Lehner, a managed service provider, founder up in the Yukon of Canada. Get to ask him some questions about how he feels about the United States. Anyways, we're going to do that next Wednesday at 2 o'clock Eastern Time, so you can sign up for that if you're interested on silicondojo.com. So the cool part is we use Zoom, so you can actually raise your hand and you can ask him your specific question. Don't believe me, as I say, distrust, verify, stay suspicious. Eli, why should I trust you? You haven't been listening, have you? You shouldn't trust me. You absolutely and utterly should not trust me. How hard is it, boys and girls? You go out there, you listen to me, you listen to other people, and then you make your bet. You make your bet. See what the hell happens. Anyways, we do that, and I do one-on-one conversations with folks every Monday between 1 to 5, and you can set up an appointment there. And so I get a lot of questions. Me being me, I get a lot of questions, and so I do these videos to try to answer those questions, just to try to put it out there. So I got an interesting question last night. From one of my buddies as I was talking about the economic whatever the hell is currently going on. What is this? What is this? I don't even know what it is. And it's funny, right? Because my wife and I have been trying to figure out what to do. We thought we were pretty set. We were pretty set on what the future was going to be. We were going to leave Asheville, North Carolina, and we were going to go to Miami. We're going to go grab a place in South Beach in Florida, and everything was going to be hunky-dory. And then our president decided to do whatever a president was decided that he was going to do. Now, to be clear, when I talk about the president, right, this isn't like normal politics. Like are you pro-globalization or anti-globalization? Are you pro-NATO or anti-NATO? Are you pro this or are you pro that? That's normally what we talk about when we talk about politics. And honestly, as I've talked about in my videos for years, I'm anti-NATO, right? As soon as the Warsaw Pact fell, I think NATO should have been on the way out right afterwards. I think NATO should have gone away back in 1995, maybe 2000 at the latest. There should be a European military alliance that we should have a treaty with, right? Again, a lot of this stuff, again, with our trade with China, as I've talked about for a long time, I do believe that we should disengage a little bit with China at the very least. But there's a difference. That's politics. That's politics. Do you believe in NATO or not? No, I don't believe in NATO. I think we should leave NATO. There's a difference between saying we shouldn't be a part of NATO and saying we're going to use military force to take over Greenland. Like what is that? Well, I don't even know what the hell that is. Again, hey, should we, deal with global trade imbalances with China? Yeah, we should definitely deal with global trade imbalances with China. Should we put 145% tariff on China? No, especially overnight. One, no, and not like this, regardless. They just put 125% tariff on us. So we have 145% tariff on them because they didn't bend the knee to Trump. Surprise, surprise. And they put 125% tariff on us. And the funny part is, so people said, oh, you're putting 125% tariff on the United States. How much further will you go? And China was like, we're not going to go any further because 125% tariff means nobody's going to be buying shit from the United States. 125% tariff is essentially a de facto ban on buying American products. At which point you're like, oh, yeah, this is good. And anyways, it was interesting, right? So I go there and I go to a tech event last night. Actually, a very good tech event. Person who ran it, you get a thumbs up. Anyways, I go to this tech event and I'm talking with some people there. And talking about what me and my wife are going to decide to do, because again, there's practical implications. There's practical implications to this horse crap, right? And so, I was talking about that. We were ready to go to Miami. My concern is with going to Miami is there were already cracks in the foundation. You could see there's already problems in Miami. Again, there's always problems there. Don't get me wrong. Like there's always problems, but you could see there are real problems there. Again, I was talking about before, there were a lot of vacant businesses that were already vacant there. And when you go around, you just kind of get that feel. You get that feel like things aren't quite humming along perfectly. But again, fine, whatever, right? Things aren't always humming along perfectly. If you want perfect, you're screwed. You're not going to get it. Anyways, so I was willing to deal with that. But then, again, when Trump starts doing what Trump starts doing, again, so Miami is an international destination, right? A massive amount of the business that goes through Miami is from international travelers. One of the things that I like about it, right? You go there and you really do. You're hearing all kinds of different languages, right? When you go to Miami, you cannot expect as an English speaker to be able to speak with everybody. That's cool. That's cool in my book. Again, you go to the tech meetups there, and so many people in the tech meetups were from all over Europe and South America, all kinds of different places, right? Incredibly, it's just great, and it's part of the economy. Well, here's the thing. When our Department of Homeland Security starts locking people in jails for very minor infractions of our policies and things, that becomes a pretty big issue. Again, it's what is your risk tolerance? If you go to the United States and you forget to declare a fucking avocado, is that gonna put you in prison for 3 weeks? That's an amount of risk that I gotta say, if I was like, wow, I'm waiting to go to Paris. I haven't been to Paris. I haven't been to Paris in a long time. I can't wait to go to Paris. And then somebody said, oh, hey, remember to check all your baggage, because if in your baggage, I don't know, you forget a peanut, and the French authorities find that peanut, you might end up in jail for 3 weeks. I'll be like, oh, really? Yeah, maybe I don't really care that much about Paris anymore. Right, again, these are real practical things to consider. And again, so we're thinking about the whole nomads thing. We're still thinking about doing the nomads thing. But then again, like I say, with 145% tariffs on Chinese goods, everything comes out of China. Everything comes out of China. Jesus, what is that going to do to the economy? I mean, that's just, right, it's a real thing. And it was kind of curious because I was talking to some of these younger folks, again, and adults. When I say younger folks, these are adults. Realize millennials now are in their 40s. I know it's funny to laugh at millennials and think they're still 15 years old, but the generation grew up. Now we laugh at the Gen Zers. Anyways, you know, so I'm talking with these adults. I mean, these are adults. These are adults who own houses and are married, and groups are having kids and the whole 9 yards. And the funny thing is, because we were talking about it, and I was just saying, you know, like I'm a little nervous with the with the whole digital nomad thing and selling the house because, you know, with the stock market tanking by whatever, 13, 15% basically in a day and everything else going on, that gives me pause. And it was curious because, you know, a couple folks around me was like, oh, how invested in the stock market are you? How significant is the stock market to you? And it was like, you folks are kind of missing the point here. I mean, whatever my stock positions are, it's kind of missing the point. Like, I'm talking about the stock market because it's the most obvious thing to point to with the insanity of our economy. Again, the stock market didn't drop 12% over six months. The stock market didn't drop 12% because an oil refinery in Dallas blew up, and so we're not quite sure how we're going to get oil to our factories or whatever else. The stock market dropped 12% because our current president is insane. Just fucking insane. Like, he was sitting there, he was like, Remember when he was up on national TV and he was like, you know, pretending to have a mental issue? He wasn't pretending. He wasn't pretending. It was like, wow, that's so accurate. Yeah, he wasn't pretending. Anyways, our stock market dropped by 12% in a single day or whatever because, our president has some severe psychological issues. And then it jumped back up. Who knows why, right? And that's the whole thing. Like, with everything going on right now, like, none of this makes sense. It's like, how do you make heads or tails? And again, like I say, from a practical standpoint, how do you make plans? What are you comfortable with? And that's one of the things I was talking about with these folks. Is like, when the Great Recession happened, it was like the economy just fucking like slid sideways. Right? It's not even like it crashed. It's almost like, you know, like we had Helene here, right? The biblical flood hit here. And it's like the recession hits in ways that you just don't think it's gonna hit. Again, like, so some places that were by streams or whatever else had zero issues. Other places were on mountainside. They were on mountainsides. They were way the fuck up. And then the entire side of the mountain just slipped off and wiped out God knows how many houses. Right, that's the thing with the recessions that you got to understand. It's kind of like when the floods, when they hit here, is you're sitting there and you're like, oh, well, if a flood hits, see, I was smart enough to buy a house on the side of the mountain. So if a flood comes through, it'll kill all of you stupid people. But I'm smart enough to buy a house on the side of the mountain. And then the rains come, and the side of the mountain just slips into the valley. And these other people here, they've got their little houses by the stream. They're like, oh, everything's kind of fine with us. Basement's a little wet. All right, that's kind of thing like what happens with the recession. Again, the Great Recession, real economic crap shows, is things just kind of go sideways. Things that companies and places that you would expect to get a lot of damage come out not too bad, and places that you think will be absolutely fine get absolutely devastated, right? It's really difficult to understand how all the dominoes will end up falling. Again, that's one of the big things to understand right now, because again, like I said, with the Great Recession, I talked about that with my business, right? When Bear Stearns fell, sucks to be them. 2 months later, the real estate market goes into turmoil. Sucks to be a real estate investor. 2 months after that, the people that supported, again, the contractors and all that, people supported the real estate industry, they get hit. Sucks to be them. And then the accountants get hit. And then more businesses get hit. And then all of a sudden, hey, we're out of business, right? Again, I had no vulnerability. I don't think I had vulnerability to fucking Bear Stearns going down. I didn't have much vulnerability as far as the real estate market was concerned. But one domino falls, the next domino falls, the next domino falls. And that's the thing to be thinking about right now, because I know a lot of you geeks out there. I know a lot of you geeks. You're like, oh yeah, it must suck to be a poor person. But I'm a node developer. I became the professional God intended. Node development. But here's the thing, is one domino falls, the next 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 domino falls. Think about this, right? So tariffs, the taxes, the insane taxes that Trump is putting on every single American, right? 145% of goods coming in from China. So you may be sitting there and you're thinking, okay, so you know these Rode microphones or whatever, the iPhone, right? So the iPhone goes from being $1,000 to being $2,000. Not even $1,000 to $2,000 now. It's $1,000 to $2,500. And it's like, well, the iPhone was too expensive anyway. I guess the dummy, the Apple, the sheeples aren't going to be buying their iPhones. But here's the issue. Here's the issue with the iPhones, right? There's a whole business that goes around the iPhones. The people that sell the iPhones, when you go to the Apple store, the people that sell the iPhones, if people are no longer buying iPhones, then those people don't have jobs. Think about all the app development that goes around with the iPhones, right? Well, if people are buying fewer iPhones, then those app developer jobs go away now, don't they? Right? Think about the domino effect. If people aren't buying so many iPhones, that's fewer FedEx drivers that have to drive the shipments around. Right? There are fewer accessories. Again, fewer accessories to go with the iPhones and all the people that are involved with that. And so you look at it and you're like, oh, boo-hoo, the Apple sheeple can't get their latest iPhone. Oh, cry me a river, first world problems. Yeah, well, those first world problems have a nasty habit of causing a lot of damage all the way down the pike, right? And I think that's one of the big things to be thinking about with this. And again, it was interesting sitting there and I was talking about, again, like the stock market falling, 145% tariffs. And now there's 125% tariffs against us. So China literally put the tariff rate so high that Chinese won't be buying our products. So everybody, farmers who ship products to China, they're not going to be shipping products to China. Boeing, who ships planes to China, they ain't going to be shipping planes to China. Again, the people, and again, think about that. Right? If you can no longer sell a plane, so a plane is, what is it, a $300 million item. When you think about $300 million, more or less, think about that as labor, right? So if the average American makes $50,000 a year, every $1 million in economic activity is 20 man years. That's 20 years of work. 10 million is 200. 100 million is 2,000. So if you look at a $300 million product that's not going to be sold, that's 6,000 years of work that are not going to be needed. And again, how that gets spread out, it gets spread out all kinds of places, but essentially for every Boeing aircraft that doesn't get shipped to China, that's 6,000 1,000 years of work that go away. Multiply at scale, and now you might see why I'm starting to get a wee bit more than a wee bit concerned about what the hell's going on. But anyways, it was interesting. I was talking to my buddy about it, and he works for a startup company. And it actually seems like a decent startup company. I haven't poked into it too much because I don't want to be snarky about my friend's startup company. But anyways, he's an employee at a startup company, and it all seems to make sense, right? They're a B2B play in the technology world. Basically, they more or less undercut a major provider out there, so they provide services at a fraction of the cost. So it's a B2B play. They provide a known value type service, and they're able to undercut their major competition by a good degree. So that all makes sense, right? And the curious thing is, again, he's been waiting for the IPO. So again, as a employee in a startup company, waiting for that IPO. And the curious thing now to think about with Trump, again, as a technology professional, is IPOs are screwed. IPOs are screwed, right? Because think about this, right? Imagine if you have a company that's to the point that you're ready to IPO. Again, you have good product market fit, you have customers, you have everything. You actually are a legitimate fit for an IPO. We now have a president who's in office who seems to have zero issue using the stock market as a ping pong ball. Right? Again, puts through these policies, we lose the value, the amount lost in stock value is the largest amount lost like damn near in history, right? Drops. He looks at things, changes his mind a little bit, and then literally pats himself on the back. Oh my God. You're just like, what the hell? Pats himself at the back as the stock market jumps by the greatest amount in something like 20 years. Hey, look. Hey, look, when I stopped shooting American feed off, our stock market went up. Well, here's the thing. Like, if you're going to IPO, right, there's this roadshow, there's this whole long, tedious, god-awful process, which is curious. Again, that whole thing with cutting down regulations, there's a whole process for going through your IPO, right? Good or bad, it is the process. And so you put out your intentions that you're going to do this. You go through the lawyers, you lock up the money people, you do the roadshow to try to get investors. At very least, it is a multi-month process that ties up everybody in your company, right? The executive staff, this is what they have to focus on, because basically not only do they have to focus on kissing investor ass and that type of thing, but they have to clean up. They have to get all the audits to make sure everything's running the way it's supposed to. Again, when you go from being a private company to a public company, you have to make sure your numbers actually equal out, right? Like when you have private investors, you can say, yeah, we're profitable, right? The private investor can be like, yeah, whatever. I got bigger things to worry about. Right? You go out to the public market, like all your books have to be up to snuff. There's this whole thing you have to go through. Now think about this though. Think about this. You decide that you're going to IPO because everything for your company seems good to IPO. And then you have a president who is willing to use the entire goddamn stock market as a ping pong ball. Not only is he willing to use the stock market as a ping pong ball, but there's going to start to be global consequences. Again, 145% tariffs against China, 125% tariffs against us, plus other tariffs all around the world, getting into a trade war. One of the things you have to be thinking about, again, when you go out there to IPO, you're selling stock. So selling anything, whether it's an iPhone or it's an equity in your publicly traded company, right? This is something that people have to decide to buy. Buying the sizzle, not the steak. So if people feel like they're flush with money, if people feel like it's blue skies from here, as far as the economy is concerned, you IPO and they want to put their money on the next hot IPO. Have you seen this company? They got product market fit. Bam! I'm putting money on that, right? I love that sizzle. Sizzle that IPO. It's a sizzling IPO. Well, here's the thing. right? If you have a bit of a global economic disaster going on, and again, you as a high net worth individual are sitting there and you're looking at your money, one of the questions has to be is, do you want to buy more equity in a company that, looks pretty good, but who knows what's going to go on, with the economy? Or do you want to put that money into bonds or into gold or into something else, right? It's a decision where you put that money. So he's in a company now, and again, the whole question about whether they IPO, I would be highly surprised if they IPO within the next couple of years, just because there is so much fundamental uncertainty. But then my buddy's like, well, it's not too bad. We did a fundraising round. We should be good. Right? I looked down and was like, well, yeah, sure, dude. I don't want to argue. Whatever, you're my buddy. You're my buddy. You're not a YouTube viewer. YouTube viewers, I'll bitch smack. You're my buddy. Hey, if that makes you feel good, if you go to sleep at night because you guys got a funding round, he's like, what? I was like, well, if you want my opinion. It's like, here's the thing about funding rounds and all that kind of stuff. Again, remember, if you're a business, you're a startup, that you need money, right? Money makes a business go around, right? Whether you have revenue, whether you have profit, whether you can get investment money, that's what pays for everything. That's what pays for the employees. That's what pays for the off-site parties. That's what pays for the advertising. That's what pays for the AWS or Azure or everything else, right? You need that money. One of the issues that you run into for startup companies, though, is what happens when they get created and they've been running along in a pretty lush, let's just say, funding environment. Right? Funding is relatively normal, right? So they go out there, they prove that, they get their initial angel investors. That's a lot of faith and everything. But past that, they hit their marks, they get more investors, they hit their marks, they get some institutional investors, they hit their marks, and it's all looking pretty good, right? So basically, you go and you pull money out of, the piggy bank, or you pull money out of essentially somebody else's piggy bank. And you say, like, okay, so we've been growing along, so we'll take this much more money, and then we'll take this much more money. And the idea there is that it's a runway. More or less, you should be taking enough money to get you, from here to there. So with runways, depending on your startup and where you're at, a runway is generally anywhere between somewhere like 1 year to 3 years. Now, the important thing to understand about this runway is that you are supposed to spend the money. I think this is what a lot of people don't understand about investors. Investors don't want to hand you money and then you put it in the bank account. If they wanted it sitting in a goddamn bank account, they could put it in their own goddamn bank account, right? I think this is like one of the things that confuses people sometimes with money, right? They are they're not giving you money, they're buying equity in your startup so that you can take that money and so that you can then use that investment to supercharge your company. Again, whether it's building more infrastructure, buying more advertising, or whatever else. They don't want it sitting in the bank account. And if it is sitting in the bank account, that can be a very questionable thing for the investors. Because again, why are they just going to put it, right? So you have this company, you got product market fit, you got So they did do an investment round, right? They've been pretty conservative about their money, but they're still expected to spend that money in order to grow. And so then the issue is, again, if you look at that investment round, if they got it like last year, they got it under the Biden administration, and they're like, okay, well, we're expecting the money to go this far. And then all of a sudden we get the current administration, the Trump administration, and God knows what the hell's going on with the economy. And so one of the interesting questions then becomes is then their decision for how to allocate resources that they made 3 months ago probably doesn't make a lot of sense in this particular environment. Again, with how things change politically, again, with COVID, right? Do you rent office space or do you push, work from home mandates, right? That was a political push. Biden's policies pushed work from home, and that's just a decision point. How businesses were being designed in 2019 did not work for how the businesses needed to run in 22, which does not work for how businesses need to run in 2025, right? This is why politics matter and all this kind of stuff, right? And so that's an interesting question, right? So you get this funding round that you're supposed to be spending through. They initially figured out what their resource allocations were going to be. Things have massively changed, so then they need to reassess what those allocations should be in an environment that is just bat crap crazy. Who literally knows what the environment is going to look like tomorrow? And literally the Trump administration doesn't seem to care. Again, it was interesting. I was listening to one of Trump's talking heads, and what literally comes out of their mouth is just, I don't know how to take this. The guy came out and was talking about with retirees. So when the journalist said, the people that are about to retire, and they just saw, 15% of the retirement count disappear, what do you say about that or whatever? And literally the guy was like, well, retirees don't look at the retirement account every day. And you're like, what? I mean, no, like again, if you've got a portfolio of investments, it goes up by 2%, it goes down by 5%, it goes up by 10%, it goes down by 15%. Over time period when things make sense, yeah, of course, you don't want to look at it every day. You're going to go insane. On the other hand, when the President of the United States specifically does things that changes the economic environment, and because of those actions he took on his lonesome, that drops the entire stock market by, a major amount. People are going to notice that. But no, the Trump administration is like, oh, you care about money. Oh, you're one of those capitalist Americans that think money is important. When did Trump start sounding like a socialist? I thought the socialists were the ones that were saying that money isn't important. Only the bourgeois worries about money. Anyways, all right. But think about that, right? So think about the environment that puts those startup founders and that startup in. So you take this investment round. The idea is that you're going to IPO within a reasonable amount of time. Again, whether it's 6 months, whether it's a year, whether it's 3 years, IPO on the horizon. How far is the horizon away? Who the hell knows, right? But it's between here to here. We're somewhere between 3 inches and 2 feet away from our IPO. What does that mean? I don't know. You asked me to give you a measurement. I said, we're somewhere around 9 inches away from our IPO. What? What do inches have to do with IPOs? It's a measurement. You wanted a measurement. I gave you a measurement. Fuck off. Anyways, so IPO, highly questionable. The funding round that they got, what does that now mean? And as I sit there and I start talking, my buddy's like, curious? You have some curious opinions there, Eli. And the next thing, the real question, the whole lead up to all this, the whole question is then, how do you know when your startup is failing? So as I started talking about this, it's like, your startup, your company has a very reasonable chance of failing in this type of environment. Again, just because you were doing good yesterday doesn't mean you're going to be able to survive this crap show. Again, as those dominoes fall, it's like, yes, let's just pretend you have a great CEO. And let's just pretend you have a great business. And let's just pretend all your employees are good. And let's just pretend everything makes sense. And even let's pretend all of your customers and clients, they're in the same boat. You're just amazing. You're so wonderful, right? You're just the wonderful startups. Let's just pretend. It's probably not true, but we'll pretend. Here's the issue. You're fine. Your customers and clients are fine. How are their customers and clients? 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 right? Eli, I am an iOS or I am an app developer. I don't buy iPhones, so this isn't going to affect us. We just create apps. Okay, what happens when the iPhone sales drop by half? Right? If people normally buy apps when they purchase a new phone, and all of a sudden the buying new phones drops by half, what does that do to your business? Again, what happens when you're an iOS developer and then people feel, they decide, maybe they still can, but they decide they can't afford or they won't afford iOS, so they go to Android. But again, and that's one of the things to think about with and that's why I say where shit just slides. Like it's not even, it just slides. So again, like this might be the perfect time to be an Android developer. Right? Hey, you can go out. So the $100 Motorola Android phone now costs $200. Right? I can afford that, right? If I could afford a $1,000 iPhone, I can afford an Android phone at double the cost, right? The Android went from $200 to $450. Is it still stupid? Yes. Is it still an insane tax that the Republicans are putting on every goddamn American, which doesn't make a damn bit of sense? Yes. But $450 is still something you can afford. So now you buy that new fancy Android phone, and when you get your new fancy Android phone, you want new apps, and so you go buy Android apps. But the weird part about Android is, again, I've talked about this with app developers, is people who buy Android phones are less likely to buy apps. One of the reasons there's so many iOS developers out there is there may be fewer iOS devices, but iOS owners are more likely to pay for the apps on their phone. Again, how is that economy sliding, right? And that's the issue. So 10 dominoes down, 10 dominoes down. You're not even thinking about these people. They fail. They fail. Those are the customers of this company. These are the set of companies, which means they fail, which is the set of customers for these companies, which means they fail. They fail. They fail. They fail. Your startup dies, right? Because you can't get the investor money for the IPO. And again, is another round of funding going to come in this particular environment? So, sitting there talking to my buddy, as he got ever less amused by this conversation, he's like, Eli, I was feeling a lot better. Eli, when I came to this meetup, I was feeling pretty good tonight. Yeah, well, you decided to talk to me. That was your decision. Anyways, and then so the question came up, is how do you know, as an employee, not as a founder, not as an investor, as an employee, how do you know when your startup or your technology company is failing? And I think this is an interesting question to think about, because this is something that a lot of folks are going to have to be thinking, to be looking at right now, again, in this current economic environment, because things are going sideways, and they're going to start going sideways so quickly that you really need to pay attention to what the hell is going on to make sure you get yourself into a good position. Again, whether you should own your house or whether you should sell your house right now, again, really depends on how confident you are about your job. Right? So, if you've got a decent mortgage on your house and you're in an area like Asheville that has no real normal economic activity, again, we're all about the beer around here. That's what we care about, right? If you get laid off from your job, let's say you have a $500,000 house, I don't know, whatever it is, $3,500, $4,000 a month you're paying in mortgage, depending on what interest rate you took out, right? If you lose your job, do you want that mortgage around your neck? Right, that's the issue. It's like, so housing prices haven't really come down a lot yet. So if you sell your house, how easily will you be able to get into another house? On the other hand, if you keep your house and then you lose your job and then the economy gets worse, so people aren't buying houses, what position does that put you in? That's the kind of thing you need to be thinking about. And so again, it was interesting. So he asked me, it was like, how do you know as an employee when your startup is failing? And I think the big thing to be thinking about as an employee for failing startups is is you have to start looking at it and asking yourself if decisions still make sense and whether or not your higher ups are gaslighting you. Now, it's important to understand when I say this that you got to put your ego aside. I know your CEO is a moron. Right? Everybody, my CEO is a moron. If I was the founder of this company, so why don't you go found a company? It's funny, if you're so smart and knowledgeable, why don't you go found a company? All right? But anyways, right, there's always this idea that the higher ups don't actually know what the hell they're doing. And so as companies naturally evolve, there will be decisions that are made that you're not going to agree with. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong or that they're crazy or anything else. You just don't agree with it. So let's say you're working with a startup company. Again, they get this investment money and the investors want that money to be put to work. They don't want the money to be put in the bank. They want it directed somewhere. So the founders are sitting there and they're like, you know what? I think if we go down this route, so this is our core product, we are going to create this additional thing that we think is going to be great for the core product. And so they go down that route, they spend a year, they have a team, they go rah, rah, rah. They tell the team how amazing the team is because the team is amazing, the people on the team is wonderful, the product's great. And then one day they kill the entire project. And you're like, what? So that's why you gotta tell the employees. You gotta make the employees think that what they're doing matters, or then they just get cranky. It's true. Anyways, and so they just killed it. And the thing is, like, you may disagree with it, you may get frustrated with it, whatever else, but basically they come out and they say, look, you know, we put all this money, we put all this time, we put in this energy going down this route, and we did not get the results that we needed from this. And again, you may argue with that. You may say that's foolish. You may say, look, they hit these particular metrics. These metrics should be enough to keep them going. But, you know, again, the founders or whatever come out and they just say, that didn't hit the metrics. Or, you know, again, AI came out of nowhere or something came out of nowhere. And so we decided to reallocate. We're reallocating the resources from this particular project to this. And again, you may disagree. You may say, I don't think that is the future for this company. I think that, but again, it's arguments. It's different opinions. And that's going to be the normal thing to be thinking about when the startup or business grows, or even when it, you know, shrinks a little bit. But when do you know your startup is failing? I used to say, again, and I will say this, like the easiest way to know your startup was failing not that long ago, and when everybody was in the office, was when they changed the coffee vendor. I've seen this. When you go from Starbucks to whatever it's called, there's this Lion coffee, like this gold foil. When you go from the startups to the Lion coffee, you're fucked. And the important thing to understand there is that, like, Starbucks Starbucks coffee costs a lot more than this Lion crap, right? But here's the thing. If you're a pretty successful tech business should have a decent amount of money. Although there is a significant difference between those two. It shouldn't be enough that the CEO even pays attention. It's kind of like with what's kind of going on with the government right now. I'm not saying that these cuts aren't saving you money. I'm just saying that in the long haul, they're not that fucking significant, right? Changing from 3-ply toilet paper to 2-ply toilet paper. I'm not saying that's not going to save the company money. But when the company is worried about how many plies the toilet paper is, it shows there's some bigger issues going on, right? But anyways, you guys are working from home nowadays. You're working from home. So how do you tell in a work from home environment when your company starts going sideways? And what I would argue is, you know, your company is going sideways when decisions no longer make sense. By hook, by crook, by any other reason, then your company is failing. They don't make sense. And what I mean by this is, so again, in the normal course of business is, you know, people are going to get hired, people are going to get fired. People are wrongfully going to get hired, and they're wrongfully going to get fired, right? You know, departments are going to get laid off that probably should have been kept. But again, you get the point, right? The issue is when startups and technology companies start failing in the kind of environment that we're going into, the issue is the company starts having to cannibalize itself. Right? So again, I talk about that as being a leader of an organization. As a leader of an organization, you're trying to keep everybody going in a particular direction. And so in order to do that, you need HR people, you need tech people, you need marketing people, you need facilities people, you need people to clean the fucking toilets, right? Anyways, you need all these people to keep the ship going into a direction. And so during growth times, right, you're thinking about the future. Again, when I had my company and we were doubling every 60 to 90 days, you may hire people before you need them, right? Look, we can see the trajectory that we're on. And so at this trajectory, we are going to need another employee in 3 months. We know it takes time to onboard the employee in order to get them up to speed. So I will hire an employee now so that they're up to speed by the time that we actually need them. Again, when you're going to rent facilities, right? That's where you see with a lot of startups, it's hilarious with new startup companies because they'll get like 50,000 square feet and they'll have 20 people. Right? And they moved 20 people into 50,000 square feet. And I had, and people are playing tennis and this thing, right? Well, and the reason is because the hope is that they're going to scale so quickly that within a year, they might be up to 1,000 employees. So 20 employees and 50,000 square feet is ridiculous. I don't know, 1,000 employees, I don't know how that works out. That probably makes a hell of a lot more sense, right? And again, that's where you see with a lot of tech companies, it goes from people playing tennis in the office because they've got so much room to everybody being crowded into these little cattle pens in order to do their work. And it actually happens like lickety split, right? So that's how things go when things are doing good. Like you over provision so that when you need those resources, they are there. But then you get to the plateau. Then you get to the plateau time. And the plateau time is, right, you have all these people. And again, since you're hiring more people than you actually need, the fact of the matter is people start to relax. Employees start to relax. Even though they're at a startup company, we're hard charging 110%. Right? They're a percentage of 110%. Let's just say that, right? If you've almost always got an additional employee, like if you're always hiring before you actually need that employee, that means most of the time you actually have more employees than you need in order to do the work, which means the employees that you have, they start backing off. They start playing a little bit more solitaire. I don't know, whatever the hell kids do nowadays, right? Because they've always right. Well, then you get to a point of plateau, and then the company's looking at, saving money. And so basically what they do is they start saving money through what's called attrition. And so what attrition is when people leave naturally. So if they fire people in the tech world, they normally get severance pay. And so severance can cost a lot of money. You don't want to pay severance pay to people. So what you do is you just wait for people to quit, and then you just simply don't replace them. Right? Okay, so we plateaued now. So as people quit the company, we are simply not going to replace those people. That means the employees of the company are now going to have to step up, actually do the amount of work that they should have been doing the entire time. And that's where you go from working 20 hours, basically working 20 hours a week to 30 hours a week to 40 hours a week to, 45 hours a week. How did that happen? Again, it's simply through that attrition. And again, you may not like it, you may not appreciate it, but it makes sense. It sucks, but it makes sense. And again, your company isn't failing. You may now be working a lot harder than you did, a year ago, but the company's not failing. You're still going to get your paycheck, benefits and all that kind of stuff. Your equity's probably still fine. The issue that you got to start worrying about is when the company starts failing. All right, because when the company starts failing, the problem is again, you've only got so much money. Right? Your IPO has been pushed out to God knows when. The investment round that you got now may have to last a hell of a lot longer than you expected. At the exact same time, you're actually still supposed to be using that money, right? Again, God knows what's going on with your customer and your client base and that type of thing. And all of a sudden, you start going that downhill trajectory. And the problem is there's just only so much money. The same money that pays the node developers is the same money that pays for that toilet paper. And all of a sudden, the issue that you're going to start seeing here is where the company starts cannibalizing itself. So basically, it's not that the developers aren't needed. It's not that the HR people aren't needed. It's not that the toilet paper isn't needed or whatever else. It's simply there's only so much money to go around. Ergo, they're going to have to start doing things in order to dramatically save money. And that's when you should really be scared, is when you go from the lion coffee to the no coffee. To the no. Wait, what happened to the coffee? Yeah, they decided that the coffee, because you have coffee, you've actually got contracting companies that deal with the coffee. Yeah, they decided the coffee contract was too expensive. But how are we supposed to stay awake for our insanely long shifts without our coffee? Right, and that's the weird thing that starts happening. So basically what has to happen for the company is that in order for the company to survive, it's got to start eating its own toes. You start with the toes because the toes are the most worthless. And then you work your way up to the heel and up the thigh. And so you've literally got to start eating yourself in order for the company to survive. And that's where you're going to start seeing decisions that truly don't make sense, but it doesn't matter because there's not enough money there. Again, with things like licensing or whatever. Like, let's say you've got a whole bunch of products, all of a sudden they drop the number of licenses that you need, or they start forcing you to go to things like open source products when you've never used those open source products before. And it's like, why the hell is this? And then the problem that you're going to get into is, again, we go back to that whole thing of mental issues, right? Is the startup founders and the executives are not going to want to tell you that the startup is failing. Right? If you're working, think about this. If you are told that you're working for a failing startup, your startup is failing, what are you going to do? You're most likely going to try to jump ship. You're going to put your stuff onto LinkedIn and you're going to bounce. And the issue for these startup companies is that the people that are going to be able to bounce are going to be the best people. Your best coders, your best HR people, your best executives are the ones that can get another job today, right? Even in economic disasters, top tier talent are still going to get jobs. So the issue is, if you come out and you tell your employees that your company is failing, your top tier talent is going to walk the fuck out the door, because that's a smart thing to do. To be clear, that's a smart thing to do. And then you are going to be left with a failing company that's being driven by quite literally your worst employees. The employees that do not feel that they can get a job tomorrow are going to be the ones that are left. So the issue is as the company starts cannibalizing itself, you're going to go and you're going to say, hey, boss, what's going on? I kind of thought that was important. And then the weird thing is, they're going to start giving you weird answers. They're going to start gaslighting you, right? Well, the reason that you don't need coffee is blah. The reason that the HR department was cut down to whatever is blah. The reason that, right? And they're going to start to give you reasons, but frankly, those reasons aren't going to make a good goddamn bit of sense. The only way the reasons would make sense is if the company is failing, but they're not going to tell you the company is failing. So therefore, they're going to give you every other reason in the world for why they did the thing that they're doing, which isn't going to make a goddamn bit of sense, because obviously it's not why they're doing it. And that is when you start to see the chaos of the startup failure. On top of that, the issue that you're going to be running into is within the startups and within technology companies. Again, most of the time employees have an outsized amount of power. Again, one of the reasons that you would want to work for a startup company is because you will get responsibilities you will not get at a major corporation. If you go work for IBM or you go work for Lockheed Martin, right, you're going to go in there, you're going to do one specific thing, and that's all you're going to do. Again, I had a buddy of mine work for Lockheed Martin, I think it was, and he was a Linux administrator, and he left, he quit. And I said, why would you quit Lockheed Martin? Made a lot of money, the whole 9 yards. And because they had 9 full-time Linux administrators, and basically he said he did 30 minutes of work a day. The idea is that when you work with Lockheed Martin, if their systems go down, if there's any kind of failure, they want to be able to put 9 senior, Linux administrators on the issue to fix it. They are willing to invest the money to make sure that if there is a problem, they have more than enough resources to deal with it. What that means is you get paid a lot of money to play a hell of a lot of solitaire, right? So we didn't want that. The thing is, in startup companies, again, they don't normally have that kind of money, or they're spending money for other things, even if they do have the money. So you get an outsized amount of power and responsibility. Well, here's the thing, right? Again, with herding cats, because technology people are cats, right? You can put them, you can put them in a suit, and you can have them smoke a pipe. They're still cats at the end of the day, right? It's from Aristotle. Anyways, and so the issue is as the company starts failing, you're then going to start to have the powers that be within the startup. And again, it may be the executives, but it may also be senior managers or whatever else. And they are going to start trying to protect what they think is valuable. So not only are you going to start having weird decisions coming out of the executives, but as those decisions filter down through the different branches of your company, the ramifications of how those decisions are actually implemented is going to get ever more stupid. And so basically, the way to look at it, if you want to understand if your startup is failing, is at the point the decisions no longer make rational sense, unless basically you fill in the blank, and instead of taking whatever excuse they're giving you, you enter into that blank, your company is failing. And that's a big thing to be thinking about, again, with these startup companies. Again, and I talk about this stuff, and it's weird. I've been talking about this stuff for a long time at this point. I've been doing YouTube for 16 years. Anyways, I talk about this, and we have so many examples. And then people think, oh, Eli's just being melodramatic. But think about this with a WeWork, right? And they didn't even have an economic disaster to deal with. That was just Adam Newman and SoftBank. Anyways, right? WeWork was supposed to be worth $45 billion. Remember that? WeWork was supposed to be worth $45 billion. They were literally about to IPO. They're like a month out of IPOing. And then people started looking at their paperwork. And you went from $45 billion to bankruptcy. So it didn't get to bankruptcy within the blink of the eye because SoftBank did bail them out, but they went from almost IPOing to basically dumping locations, dumping staff, the whole 9 yards, and it did wind up in bankruptcy after like a year or two, right? And that's the thing to realize about these companies. Again, a lot of these employees at WeWork, they were crying. Where is our severance pay? It's like, oh God, I hate young people sometimes. Young people in the tech world just drive me up the wall. Look, Yahoo. Here's the thing. You work for a startup company, that gets you equity. What that means is you're taking the risk. If WeWork actually IPOs for $45 billion, it means you get to retire to a very sunny country and sit by the beach all day. It also means if your company doesn't IPO and fails miserably and goes into bankruptcy, you walk away with nothing. That is what's called risk. Nothing for you. Nothing, as Willy Wonka would say, right? But it was funny. It was funny with WeWork. When WeWork failed, literally the employees were like, but what about our severance pay? It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? You took a job with a startup company to get equity. Startup company failed. Startup company. Many of us were like, this doesn't make sense. Nobody wanted to pay attention to Eli. Whatever, right? And that's one of the things to be thinking about in the real world, how these tech companies can fail, again, even in rather normal times. And so that's something that you're going to need to be thinking about when you go to your startup, when you go to your company, and really look around and ask yourself, am what I seen makes sense? Again, it's also interesting, talking about this whole whole economic crap show. Again, it's interesting being here in Asheville. So Asheville doesn't have a lot of a startup. It doesn't have really any of a startup scene. It doesn't have a really good tech entrepreneur scene. And the curious thing here, again, one of my frustrations is it's all remote workers. So they're tech people. I don't know if they're really my kind of tech people though. Because I mean, they go and they code and they get their paycheck and they come home. I don't know if that's what you call a tech professional, then they're tech professionals. But what's curious is I've talked with a number of them, again, with this whole economic thing going on, and then I'm like, yeah, well, you know, what's the price point for your company's product? And the curious thing is, the answer I get is, duh, I don't know. It's like, well, what is the value proposition within your vertical for your company over the competition? I don't know. I'm like, okay. And the curious thing, talking with so many employees, is that they literally do not understand the business that their company is in. And so think about that in this particular environment, again, with, you know, inflation, all this other kind of stuff going on. Do you think it's wise to not understand how your business operates so that you understand what's going on? Right? Again, this is my argument for all of you. You should all understand how your business works. You know, I think one of the things that's interesting, like, again, I had a buddy of mine who just won a startup. So there was a hackathon. So there's a hackathon here in Asheville. Yeah, it's okay. Anyways, the curious thing with the hackathon is he won the hackathon. And I was surprised. I didn't think he did a great job. I didn't think he did a great job. But wait for it. Wait for it. Right? Because it was weird, right? So my buddy goes and he has a little team at this hackathon and they go do their deal. And I like the idea, don't get me wrong. I like the idea, I like the product. But my God, their competition fucking bitch smacked them. Like, just, it seemed like bitch smacked. Like, so they go to the hackathon and so they're doing the final demo day or whatever. And so my buddy, right, he has this startup idea and he has this app idea and that's that. You know, the next person that goes up basically has this idea. It's like mental health after COVID or whatever. Literally, like the health system of. She works in like one of the hospitals or the school in North Carolina, and they literally have asked her to take the product that she's created and basically commercialize it and scale it because it's so desperately needed in North Carolina. So this isn't just like an idea. This is something that's already been created that the health establishment is saying, please turn this into a company so that we can buy from you, right? Anyways, and then we go along, and there's another company. It's kind of interesting. They do clothing, but so the idea is like when you have a surgery or whatever, it's like sometimes it's hard to get normal clothing on. So what they do is they kind of create templates for clothing, and then when you have a particular surgery, you order what you want, you tell them what kind of surgery you had, and then they modify that particular clothing that they already have in stock. So you're not having to buy something that's off the shelf, that's not going to work for you, and you're not having to buy something that's custom tailored, that's going to be incredibly expensive. They kind of hit the middle ground. So they actually have a provisional patent for this thing, and they're going forward with it. Another person there, it was this boutique or whatever, you know, experiences thing, and she's already made $45,000. So I like my buddy. I like my buddy's idea, but you know, they have a provisional patent. She's already made $45,000. They're already part of the health establishment, and they're demanding that this thing actually gets commercialized. And you've got a nice app. Anyways, come to my surprise. They get to the end. The award is giving out, and they win first place. They win it all. And I literally go to my buddy, I'm like, yeah, congratulations. Why? Good for you, good job, but why? Anyways, so he goes, and he wasn't sure. He actually wasn't sure why he won. So he goes and he talks to the people in the whole 9 yards. And basically what it came to, so let me think about what it came to, is the first day of the hackathon, he literally asked, what are they going to be judged on? When they go up and they do their demo, What are the points that they're going to be judged on? And so they were literally given the 5 points that they were going to be judged on. And so when he developed the demo, and when he developed everything, when they went up the show there, he developed all of it based off of those 5 points. And the interesting part, having been there watching the demos, is none of the other companies hit all those 5 points. So although one was already $45,000 profitable, one had a provisional patent, one had but when they went to be judged, they didn't hit the 5 points. And so that's one of the things I want you to be thinking about. Again, why office politics matter, why you need to talk with people and the whole 9 yards, is because then you understand what you're being judged on, you understand what your company is being judged on, you understand what the environment you're all dealing with is. And then when you understand all of that, you get a better idea of what's going on. So anyways, there you go. How to know if your startup is failing? Well. When you see the CEO gnawing on the toes of the help desk employees, when the CEO comes into the help desk with a steak knife and a bottle of barbecue sauce, I would suggest run. I would suggest run. But that's going to be the big thing to be thinking about. When does stuff stop making any kind of sense? Again, not that you disagree with it. You're always going to have your opinion. But when you're like, no, this just doesn't make a damn bit of sense, that is when you know your company is going sideways. So anyways, there you go. There is some thoughts for companies going sideways during this economic idiocy. What is this even? I don't know what this is. Damn fruit bats and their 145% tariffs. I want to get back to the source of this 145% tariffs. Was this a tariff lab leak? Was this a wet market tariff? Was this a McDonald's hamburger tariff? I need to find the epicenter. Where is the epicenter for the idiotic tariffs starting from? And we need to quash that. We need to isolate and quarantine wherever the hell the 145% tariff came from immediately, stat now. So anyways, dominoes are going to start falling. Dominoes, remember, right now, we are currently burning through inventory. Whatever Amazon already has in inventory, whatever the retailers already have in inventory, we're not seeing the 145% tariffs yet because they still got this stuff in inventory. As they burn through inventory, we're going to start to see the tariffs. And yeah, again, $1,000 iPhone goes to $2,500 just in taxes. Trump is going to tax you $1,500 on an iPhone. The Republicans are going to tax you $1,500 on an iPhone. The Republicans and Trump are going to tax you $1,500 on an iPhone so that Elon Musk can get a goddamn tax break. And think about that. Again, the sizzle, the sake, the visceral feel. How do you feel being forced to hand over $1,500 in taxes so that Elon Musk can get a tax break? Does that make you want to buy one of these things more? And again, it's, oh, ha ha. Again, I won't be a sheeple. But if you're not a sheeple, Again, what happens to the Apple stores? What happens to the malls that the Apple stores are in? What happens to the retail areas that Apple stores are in? So again, I talk about that with Miami. So in Miami, there's a place called Lincoln Road. Lincoln Road is cool. Well, normally it's cool. Most of the time it's cool. Right now it's a little, it's not doing so well. But again, like you have these pedestrian thoroughfares, these pedestrian retail areas. Well, you go there, right? Because you got Lululemon, and you have Apple Store, and you have Nike Store, and you have local places. There's this amazing candy store there. Best candy store in the world is on Lincoln Road. Anyways, you have all this stuff. But here's the thing. As this business shuts down, and this business shuts down, and this business shuts down, right? You come to this retail area so that you can look at all the retail stores, and then you buy from some. You do that at scale, tens of thousands of people, everybody makes money. This store closes, 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 this store closes. Oh, Apple Store, and now no longer makes sense to have an Apple Store. Now, not only are those stores closed, and so you don't have economic activity there, but do you want to go to a retail area where half the stores are closed? How much business do the rest of the stores lose? And then you think about, right, all those are facilities. Those are, and so you have investors that have invested into those stores, and they lose money. And those stores, right, they need maintenance, they need upkeep, they need plumbing and electricity and roofing work and all that kind of stuff. And then the people that worked for those stores, they lived in the local area. Well, if they don't have jobs anymore, can they afford rent? The dominoes fall, right? Anywho, don't worry. Again, as my wife and I tell each other almost every day, at the end of the day, we're all dead anyway. Don't worry, nobody gets out of life alive. So, as long as you're alive, that there's something to be said. Anyways, I think that's all I got to say before things get really, really dark. Oh, this isn't dark. It can get much darker, but we won't go there. Anyways, if you're going to Web Summit Vancouver, I should be there. Hopefully, if I can get through Canadian border control. Oh, my president doesn't do anything too much more stupid in the next month and a half. Anyways, I'll be there. If you're there, maybe say hi. See you later.